So, a little morning poetry. For anyone who doesn't know, a cento is a poem which takes pieces of other poets' poems and stitches them together to create an original work. And I'm reading some Billy Collins in addition to taking his master class, and he was a poet laureate of the United States in the early 2000s, and is more of the more well-known poets in the United States. And traditionally, most people like to take two different poets and stitch them together. But what I've done instead is taken 4 of his poems from the current work that I'm reading and stitched them together. None of the lines appearing next to each other appear next to each other in his poems, and I tried to weave them in so that none of the stanzas include anything twice from the same poem. Hopefully I've succeeded in that. I think I have. The poems in question are Memento, Mori, the Snag, the Flaneur, and the Guest. And the resulting work I've titled The Snag with the Memento Mori of my guest, the Flaneur. It tells a story that seems emotionally cohesive, but doesn't necessarily make sense unpoetically. It only makes sense poetically. The mind makes it want to make sense, but if you overthink it and don't give your heart over to the poetry, you may not enjoy it quite as much. So this is The Snag with Memento Mori of my guest, the Flaneur. It doesn't take much to remind me in the concept of a time machine here in this room a few days ago, standing under the bones of a dinosaur with a vial of poison tucked into a pocket to best appreciate the crisis of modern life. Even the Church of St. Anne will do. That dome, which covered the troubled church of his mind, began to sing in a beautiful voice. But early this morning I did notice, and the realization that no one, 2 of them even touching the glass. The only time I found myself at all interested always pulls me up by the reins and settles me down, and then I fell into a reverie on the folly of youth. So many reminders of my mortality as a boy flew on a skateboard in the gray light. Sign over the door of this bar in Cocoa Beach, but instead of Paris, I was in Florida, and my suitcase only half unpacked by the door. And that's your morning poetry. A cento by breaking up the work of the famous Billy Collins. So it's a cento by the much less famous me, using the words of the famous Billy Collins out of order. Thanks for listening.